Today we're talking about polynomial division. So in order to talk about polynomial division, which of course would mean dividing a polynomial by a polynomial, we have to revisit long division. So polynomial long division, which we'll talk about in just a minute, but the dividend must be in standard form, and if needed, add in zero placeholders. So we'll talk about that as we go. So you're asking yourself, well, what is the dividend? So remember, the dividend is, in this case, if we were dividing f of x by d of x, so f of x would be the dividend, d of x is what you're dividing by, so the divisor. Your answer is the quotient and the remainder divided by the divisor. So if we look at this first problem that we have, let's revisit this when we're just dividing things that are numerical. So 5,627 divided by 4, we can rewrite as 5,627 divided by 4. Those two things mean the same thing. So when we are dividing this using our long division without our calculator, if you recall from elementary school, so the dividend, which remember is this right here, so the dividend goes underneath our division symbol. So 5, 6, 2, 7, the divisor goes on the outside. So when we divide, remember, you look, how many times does 4 go into 5? So 4 goes into 5 once. And then remember, the next step we do is you multiply. So 1 times 4 is 4. And after you multiply, you subtract. So 5 minus 4 gives me 1. And then the next step is to bring down the next term because 4 doesn't go into 1. But 4 does go into 16 4 times, so then that number goes up here. Then you multiply, so 4 times 4 is 16. Then we subtract the numbers, so 16 minus 16 is 0. So then again, you bring down the next value that we have, which is 2. 4 doesn't go into 2 because it's too small, so then that means we need to put a 0 placeholder here, and we bring down the 7. So 4 can go into 27 6 times, because 6 times 4 is 24. And then you subtract the terms. And when you do, you get 3. And since there are no more spots, that means that 3 is the remainder. So what did we do? We divided, then we multiplied, subtracted, we brought down, and then we repeated the steps each time. So the way that I like to remember this is, does McDonald's sell burgers? It helps me remember the steps, and I'll write that out in just a second. So I could rewrite this as 5,627 divided by 4 is equal to 1,406 or 1,406 plus 3 divided by 4, because it doesn't go in any further. So that would be our answer. And of course, you could write 3/4 as a decimal, so 1,406.75, but we're just going to leave it like this for now. So remember, the quotient, which is our answer, is 1,406, and the remainder is always going to be divided by the divisor because it couldn't go in anymore. So let's go ahead and write those steps out here. So D, does McDonald's sell burgers? Repeat. So D stands for divide. M stands for multiply. S stands for subtract. B stands for bring down. And R stands for repeat. So whatever helps you to memorize that so you know the steps, that's fine. So we use these steps when we're dividing a polynomial by a polynomial. So here we have the dividend, which is 6x squared minus 17x plus 32 divided by x plus 2. So we could also write this as 6x squared minus 17x plus 32 divided by x plus 2. So whenever you're dividing a polynomial by another polynomial that's more than one term, you have to use long division. So we're going to set it up just like we did our other problem that was numerical. So x plus 2 is the divisor, so that goes on the outside. Then the dividend goes underneath our sign. So this would be 6x squared minus 17x plus 32. And remember before I noted up here that the dividend must be in standard form. So that means that in this case, standard form, you start with the highest power term of x and go in descending order and add in 0 placeholders if needed. So for this one, notice we have a degree of 2 term, a degree 1 term, and a degree 0 term when you don't have an x. So that means this is in standard form and I'm not missing any 0 placeholders. So how do I do long division of polynomials? So I like to do work off to the side, which you'll see me do over here. So this is my work. So we're going to follow the steps. The first step that it says to do is D, which stands for divide. So I'm dividing the first terms, just like I did over here. I wanted to see how many times does 4 go into 5. So I take 6x squared and I divide it by x. So we know by our properties of exponents, when I have 2 terms being divided with the same base, you subtract the exponent, so this becomes 6x. Notice this is a linear term. So because this is linear, you're going to want to line this up with the linear terms. So this 6x would go above the 17x because that's also linear. Then what's the next step? M stands for multiply. So now what are we multiplying? So over here, what did we multiply? We multiplied 1 times the 4 to get the 4. So it's the same idea, except for we have more than one term here that we're multiplying. We have 2 terms. So that means I'm going to take this 6x, multiply it by x. So 6x times x is 6x squared. And 6x times 2 would give me 12x, so positive, so plus 12x. Then the next step that we have is S, which stands for subtract, and that's kind of hard to see, so I'll use a different color. So S is subtract. So now we subtract the terms. So be careful when you're subtracting the terms because you need to change all the signs. So if you want to write it with a minus on the outside in parentheses and then remember to distribute, that's fine. Or if it helps you to change the signs as you go. So this would be minus 6x squared, and then this is minus and circle them. Whatever helps you, that's fine. So first of all, we know that 6x squared minus 6x squared, we did that on purpose to cancel them out. That should always happen. If it doesn't happen, then you need to look at it again. So that cancels out to leave us with 0x squared, so we don't need to write that. Then the next terms that we have is 17x minus 12x. So 17x minus 12x gives us negative 29x. And then the next step in our factoring is to do B, which means bring down. So we're going to bring down the 32, and it's plus 32, so we just write plus 32. And then notice that our divisor is x plus 2, which that's a degree of 1. And what we have right here is a degree of 1, so we can keep on going. So R stands for repeat. We're just going to repeat these steps over. So now we're going to go back to D, which stands for divide. So we're going to divide again those first terms. So now my first term is negative 29x, and we're dividing that by our first term here, which is x. So you're always using your first terms to divide. So when I divide negative 29x divided by x, the x's cancel out, so leave you with minus 29. So that goes above the constant terms because there's no variable. M stands for multiply, so now we multiply the negative 29 times the x. So when we multiply that, negative 29 times x is negative 29x, and negative 29 times 2 would give us minus 58. And then the next step we have is M, which is multiply, or sorry, we did multiply, so S is subtract. So now we have to subtract our terms. And again, you can do the parentheses way and write the minus on the outside, and then just you have to remember to distribute. Or if you prefer, you can write the signs next to it, and I like to circle it so I don't forget. So this would be minus, minus, so that becomes a plus. And then this one right here is again minus, minus, so that would become plus. Whatever helps you to remember, it's fine. So now we have negative 29 plus 29, so those first terms cancel out, which we did on purpose. And then 32 plus 58, which ends up giving me 90. So now there's no more spots to put anything else in. There's no other terms to bring down. And 90 is a degree 0, whereas our divisor is degree 1. So since it's smaller, that means that 90 is the remainder. And again, the degree is less than the divisor. So when we're writing our answer, we would write the quotient, which was 6x minus 29, plus our remainder, which is 90, divided by the divisor, because it didn't go in anymore. So this right here would be our solution. So this takes practice. So let's go ahead and do another example. So for this next example, we're going to do the same thing. So first things first, we're going to rewrite our equation. So the divisor goes on the outside. Then my dividend, remember if you're not in standard form, make sure you're in standard form. If you're missing any 0 placeholders, add those in. So x cubed would be a term of degree 3, 2, 1, 0. So that means we are not missing any 0 placeholders. And we can just write it in. So I'm going to do my work off to the side. So for my work, remember, we write down, does McDonald's sell burgers? Repeat. D stands for divide. So I divide my first terms, x cubed divided by x. So what's x cubed divided by x? It's x squared. And because it's quadratic, we line that up with the quadratic terms. The next step is m, which stands for multiply. So now I multiply x squared times x, which is x cubed, x squared times 2, which is plus 2x squared. And then the next step is to subtract. So I'm going to write the negative on the outside this time and show you a different way to do this. So don't forget to distribute the negative. So x cubed minus x cubed cancels out, which we did on purpose. Then we have negative x squared, and then you have to distribute the negative here. So negative x squared minus 2x squared gives me negative 3x squared. And then b stands for bring down the other term, so plus 4x minus 10. And then r stands for repeat, so we're going to repeat the steps again. So d stands for divide our first terms. So we have negative 3x squared divided by x. So that gives us negative 3x, which is linear, so that goes above the linear terms. Then m stands for multiply. So now we're going to multiply our terms. Negative 3x times x is negative 3x squared. Negative 3x times 2 is minus 6x. And then we have to subtract. So when we subtract, that means we have negative 3x squared minus negative 3x squared. So those would cancel out because minus minus becomes plus. And then 4x, and you have to subtract it from negative 6, so it's minus minus, so it's plus again. So 4x plus 6x gives us 10x. Remember, you have to change those signs and then bring down the 10. So again, our divisor and our what we have right now for part of our answer, the degrees are both 1, so we can still divide this. So we're going to start over and repeat. So now we have 10x divided by x, because those are our first terms. So now if I divide those, 10x divided by x is positive 10, so plus 10. M stands for multiply, so 10 times x is 10x. 10 times 2 gives me 20, and it's positive. And then we're going to subtract. So 10x minus 10x cancels out, which we did on purpose. And then negative 10 minus, because you're distributing that negative, so negative 10 minus 20 would be negative 30. And that is our remainder because there's no other spots to go. So then the way that we write our answer, so it's the quotient, x squared minus 3x plus 10. And then you can write the remainder one of two ways. You can write plus negative 30 divided by x plus 2, or if you want to write minus 30 over x plus 2, it means the same thing. So either answer would be correct. And so that is our long division. So let's go to the next